Well, hey there, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am your host, Janine Alley, and you're listening to Becoming the CEO of Your Life today. And I wanted to let you know right up front the decision that I made last week, this was something I was alluding to, is to really slow down on the podcast. This is going to be my last episode for a while. And I wanted to talk today about taking a leap of faith and what that means and what that looks like and the journey that has taken me to get to this place because it's been a crazy journey. And it's been for me so fascinating to look back and realize that so much of what I've been sharing and what I've been teaching about self-trust has ultimately been for me to get myself to this space where I am feeling open and free to make any kind of decision without any attachment to results, without any attachment to the past, even. And I think for content creators, we often create the things that we are learning, the things that we're discovering along the way. And we share that. We share what's working, we share what's not working. And that has been true for me. But I had no idea that that path, the things that I was learning, was actually going to get me to a place where I am today, making that announcement and sharing that with you when that, of course, was never my intention. I don't know what my intention was to be podcasting for 20 years. I don't know, but I need to take a step back. And so I wanted to just talk about that journey with you today because it has been a journey, and making hard decisions like this take a lot of processing. They take a lot of seeking and thinking outside of the box and exploration and curiosity. And I wanted to just talk about all of the things today with you because you might be in that space where you feel like you're at a crossroads and you're looking at some decisions that you might need to make in your own life. Oftentimes, when we start off doing something, we think it's for a specific reason. We have usually an outcome in mind. And more often than not in my own life, it turns out that it's never been about that. God has had something else in mind. There were lessons that I needed to learn that I didn't realize I needed to learn until I started marching down that path. And sometimes it's really tough to see these lessons because our ego often gets in the way. We think we know certain things. We think we have an understanding of why we're doing something or why we've been inspired to start something or stop something when we really, like I said, have no idea. So, like I said, the way forward for me doesn't include podcasting. I'm going to take a break and I have no idea if I'll be back or when I'll be back. And this is usually the way that it goes. It's kind of ironic. I don't think oftentimes I tell myself there really aren't coincidences in things, but interestingly, when I started my podcast in 2018, I did 104 episodes. And when I made the decision to stop the podcast, I also had done 104 more episodes, which is crazy. I mean, what is the odds of that happening, right? But anyway, so I have no idea what's coming next. I just know what the next step is. I don't know what the next step is. So I am taking this leap of faith and moving in this direction. And like I said, I'm not sure what's going to happen. This has been a very long and hard decision to get here. And like I said, I wanted to talk about that today because sometimes the inspiration that we receive is so unexpected, we don't see it for what it is. And it often comes in really unusual ways, which has been true for me. I'm going to share something that might blow your mind a little bit in just a second. So I realize now this decision has been about a year and a half in the making. It's kind of one of those things. Hindsight is always 20/20, right? I can look back and see, oh, I can see why I was connected with that person, or I can see how and why I made that decision. And I'll just tell you, I was working with somebody in marketing about a year and a half ago, and you know how I am, or how I've talked about myself in the past, of somebody who has wanted to be very meticulous about following all the scripts. And it was all about the framework and it was all about following the outline. And she was not like that. She worked off script. And it was not what I was used to doing at all. And this really opened my eyes that for the first time, I could do things my way and still have success. And that has been true. And that has been a little bit mind blowing for me. And about a year ago, I was sitting in the Life Coach School Mastermind with all of the Life Coach School coaches. And one of the things that I was watching was all of the master coaches get their certification to be master coaches. And they gave them like 10 seconds to say a little something after they received their certification. And I would say the majority of them, I would say maybe 85% of the people that walked across the stage said something about self-trust. And so it was all kind of coming together for me. And then in January was when I started teaching and talking a lot more about self-trust. And I feel like self-trust is one of those layers that you can't get to in the beginning of what it is that you're doing. You're so focused on trying to learn something new that you're not really connected that way to yourself. And I feel like this is on purpose, right? There is a space and there is a place for sure for book learning and learning from other people. I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at, of course, right now without any of that or all of that. But I will say that the missing piece for so long for me was that self-trust component. Looking at my business, I have always tried to improve the thing that I'm doing, whether it was creating better content or giving my clients what I felt like they wanted or they needed, or becoming a better coach. And it was never, ever on my radar to pivot away from doing any of that and doing something different. And because I have been so focused on cultivating that self-trust, I was open and I was brave enough to consider the change and to consider doing something different. Probably not completely different, because I still am going to coach for my current clients for sure. So if you're a current client of mine, don't worry. I'm still going to be creating content for you. I'm still going to be here for you. I'm still going to be probably on your end of things. Nothing's going to change. I'm still going to be coaching for the Commit Foundation. But as far as marketing my own business and putting myself out there and doing the podcast, that I'm scaling way, way down, because I feel like something else is on the horizon for me. And I need that space and that time to be open and to have that time to think. And this is hard to do when we create new things. I've mentioned before about my little pottery turtle whistle. I think I just talked about it maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I talked about how my art teacher, my pottery teacher, was teaching us a lesson after we created something and then intentionally destroyed it, that art isn't sacred and your business isn't sacred either. And there have been times in my business where I have created my business as kind of an idol. Like I was here feeling like this has to work. And my self-identity, my own value as a person, my own worth was tied up in doing. It was tied up in productivity. It was tied up in this quote unquote success of what it was that I was doing. And I have to tell you that over the last 4 or 5 years, I have learned so much about how all of those ideas just are not true. The things that we create are meant to bring us joy. And the idea that we have of what success looks like and what failure is totally defined by us. It doesn't have to be defined by what we feel like society would call a success or a failure. So fortunately, I am somebody who is constantly checking in. I'm pretty in tune with my body, what it is that I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, what's going on. And I, over the last winter and spring, I've been experiencing a lot of back pain. And this has been going on actually for a while before the winter and the spring, but it was beginning to be pretty intense, to the point where at the end of March, I was not able to get out of bed. There was one morning I was in so much pain, I couldn't physically move, which is so unusual for me because I am a very fit person. You guys know I teach yoga, I lift weights, but I'd go for a walk after the end of my workday, for example, and I couldn't even stand up to make dinner at the end of the day. And so after the day that I couldn't move, I made an appointment with a chiropractor, and I was doing everything that he possibly suggested. And I was constantly asking myself, okay, what is going on? This is probably not a physical component, because I didn't get in an accident. I wasn't lifting something heavy or something pinched or tweaked. None of that made sense. So I knew that there was some kind of emotional or mental thing going on. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe it's because my kids are growing up and moving out. And I did a podcast about that. And I was just thinking about a lot of things that it could be. And I wasn't really thinking at all that it had anything to do with my business because I wasn't really feeling a lot of stress with that. But I was taking all of these different avenues. I mean, every single avenue that I could think of, I was doing to try and solve for this back pain. I was praying. I mean, you name it, physical, mental, emotional. I was spending extra time doing yoga. I was really being very contemplative and meditative about it. But when I was in Olympia about a month ago, this was something that I was kind of worried about. In fact, I was worried that I would be the person that kind of held up the group because I was like, I can barely walk in my neighborhood and do the usual loop without feeling like, whoa, I got to take a break. I got to sit down. But when I was there with my girlfriends in Olympia, my back didn't hurt at all, which I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like it was so noticeable for me because it had been so chronic for months before that. And it was the first time that I considered I needed to switch gears because as soon as I came home and as soon as I walked back in my office, I could feel it. And that was a sign to me that something was out of alignment. So one thing that I need to add in here is although I love coaching, I love content creating, marketing has never been my favorite thing. So when I was building a funnel before in the past, there was kind of this thrill that came along with it. It was kind of the thrill of the hunt, if you will, to find people that I could help. And kind of this, like the question in my mind was, okay, is this going to work? And there was kind of an element of fun there. And I noticed over time, over the last several months or so, that this was gone. And one of the things I've really appreciated learning from my current coach, Fabi Paolini, is that if you're not doing something that feels good, then you need to focus on that. You need to pay attention to that. And I've been talking about that because it's something that that I agree with and that I believe. We want to focus on the things that that feel good to us. And I'm not talking about things that we do to buffer negative emotions. I'm talking about being really intuitive and genuinely connecting to ourselves and doing things that feel aligned. When they feel aligned, they're going to feel good. And the marketing part of my business no longer felt good. And if I even thought about doing it, I noticed after Olympia, my back would start to hurt. So I'm like, okay, there is this connection here. And the thing that I feel like has been helpful to me is in this journey, I've been able to stay fairly objective with what is going on. Not always. I mean, sometimes I get wrapped up in, just my experience of the grief of letting go or, that sense of loss that I have, or even focusing or thinking about how it's been a failure. Even though I know that that's not true, these thoughts do surface from time to time. However, I think one of the things that I've learned as a coach and as a yogi is how to create that separation. And I was able to do it more than I ever have before in my life. And I think that that was really helpful. But it didn't seem to make sense to me at the time because, like I said, I love coaching. I love my clients. But it seemed like I was willing to surrender everything else except for my business. But I fortunately finally started to consider it after this trip to Olympia. And it felt at first very scary. It felt very unstable to me. But at the same time, there was a portion of me that felt peace and felt curiosity and felt the fun of doing something new. And that has never been there before. I will tell you, I have always wanted to live my life in accordance with God's will. It's the reason why I started my business is because I felt inspired to do it. I felt inspired to homeschool my kids. I'm so happy to do anything that he asked me to do because I trust that inspiration. I trust that direction more than I trust what I think is best, generally speaking. right? Sometimes, like I said, we get wrapped up in our own ego, and we have to learn how to set that down and to set it aside. But I know that if I'm following God's will for my life, I'm going to get the most growth out of my life experience. I'm going to find the most joy out of my life experience. He's going to help me to use my talents and my abilities to help other people. And that's ultimately what I want. So, one weird thing that I will tell you here, and you might think I'm a little bit nuts, but I will tell you, I did not recognize this as a sign. I'm not somebody who looks for signs or thinks about signs from God at all, really, very much at all, unless it's so obvious. And I feel like this one was so obvious for me. But after my trip to Olympia and coming back and me starting to really start to consider that maybe I need to create some space here to have that time to think and to see what else is coming down the pipe for me. I started noticing on my walks every day, and I walk multiple times a day. I usually walk once in the morning, once in the evening. And because it's been hot, it's been, uh, you know, like 7 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. And I've noticed on my walks that there has been a great horned owl that has been sitting in this tree. And I just have to tell you a little background about myself and birds for this to really make sense for you. But I am a bird nut. I'm not like crazy. I don't do like the big year with birding, if you know what that is. I do know what it is, but I wouldn't do anything like that. But I just love birds. And I think this comes uh, genetically. I know my mom is a bird nut and my grandparents loved birds. And anytime I'm on a hike, I love to see what kind of birds are out. I have a birding app on my phone. I mean, I get a little bit crazy about birds. When I was a kid, we actually had this bird identification game, and I knew all of the birds in this game. And I think it's just because I love them. I love to watch them fly. And one of my favorite animals is an osprey because of my experience as a river guide and watching them catch fish and all the things. So I have this love of birds, this affinity for birds. And so I noticed this massive bird in this tree. It was just sitting in a cottonwood tree in my neighborhood. I live in a residential area. It's not like I'm in the mountains. I live by, I mean, not too far away from some busy streets. And I saw this bird, and I didn't just see it once. I saw it like every day for 4 or 5 days in a row. And it was while I was making this decision. And on my fourth or fifth day seeing this bird, I'm like, wait a minute, like, is this a sign? Like, could this be for me? And one of the things that I believe is that all things in nature really testify of there being a God. And so I'm like, okay, maybe, I start looking around like, okay, this is a little bit strange. Maybe this is a sign for me, to trust the wisdom that is coming through, because owls represent wisdom. They also, because they're birds, they represent flight and flying and freedom and those kinds of things. And so I was starting to kind of create these connections in my brain. And this is one of those experiences that it's really hard to put into words the exact experience and the exact inspiration that was coming through. All I can tell you, though, is that I felt like, okay, this is for me. This is something that I need to trust. And so I decided, I actually told my kids, what I was thinking about. We had taken them out to dinner and I was talking about it. And I was feeling good about the decision. That was on a Wednesday evening. And on Thursday, I didn't see the owl at all. And I'm like, okay, well, that's different. And then on Friday, my husband had the day off on Friday, and I was out for a walk with him in the morning. And I started questioning all over again. Is this the right thing? What about this? And just going through that process, you're going to have those moments of wavering, right? The things that I talk about sometimes, and just feeling like, what if I regret my decision? What if and I know regret is a choice as a coach, but we still go through these things. And anyway, and I walked by that tree and the owl was back. And I was like, man, dang, okay. So just continue to trust the wisdom coming through. And so it's just been kind of an interesting experience. I have felt, like I said, inspired. I have felt seen through the process. And I feel just a lot of emotions, as you can tell. But yeah, we'll just see. I will tell you, like I mentioned, I'm still coaching, still working for the Commit Foundation. I'm still working with the clients that I love so much. And at the same time, I'm leaving room to figure out my next steps. And I have to tell you that I really appreciate you being with me through this journey. And if you need support, watch the masterclass on my website. I've been giving little shout outs all along to that webinar. You can just find it at JanineAlley.com/webinar. You can send me an email to the contact form also on my website, or you can connect to me or connect with me on social media. So that is it. That is the story that I have to tell and share this week. I hope that my experience of kind of working through this process verbally out loud with you guys helps you in some way in the journey that you're on as well. I hope you guys have a beautiful and wonderful rest of your week and stay connected somewhere out on the internets. All right, take care, you guys. We'll see ya.